Welcome back. You probably recall we had covered very closely the trial of Billy Ray Turner here on Law and Crime. Well, today he was sentenced on some remaining charges. Judge Lee Coffey had already sentenced Turner to life in prison for the first-degree murder of Lorenzen Wright. He was a former basketball star, NBA star, who had been shot several times back in 2010. Turner was sentenced earlier on counts of conspiracy to commit murder and murder with criminal intent. So there were some additional charges that he was sentenced on actually today. So let's look at the first sentencing hearing where Judge Coffey sentenced him to life in prison, and then we'll look at the other sentencing that took place today.
Judgment on count one, the conviction for first-degree murder. The court, in fact, will sentence Mr. Turner as required by law to life confinement in the Tennessee Department of Correction. Life in Tennessee is construed to be 60 calendar years. Mr. Turner will be eligible to be released on some form. He can earn sentence reduction credits rather than 15% sentence reduction credits based on programs credit behavior, and could be released after serving 85% of the sentence. And under current Tennessee law, that is construed to be 51 calendar years. We'll set the other two counts for sentencing. And on Ms. Marion particularly, I know you've been waiting 12 years. And sometimes folks will tell you, or judges will tell you, that I hope this brings closure to you. I'm not going to tell you that, Ms. Marion, because I learned a few years ago that there's no closure. There's no winners. There's no losers in this trial. Ms. Turner and his family have lost a lot. You have lost a lot. You've lost your son. I will urge you to consider and remember the good things. Celebrate his life. Celebrate all the good, all the joy that Lorenzen Wright brought to you, and don't dwell on his killing, because no matter what I tell you, no matter what words I say, no matter what anybody tells you, there will never be closure. There will never be anything that says somehow this is all right, this is good. That's something that you would carry with you the rest of your life. But celebrate the good. Celebrate all the joy that he brought. Celebrate and rejoice in who he was, and do not remember him as what you saw on this screen. Thank you for your patience. I want to thank Mr. Turner for his patience. Also, I know it's been a long time coming for Mr. Turner. And again, there's no winners, no losers. So when you leave the courthouse, if you see family members on either side, be kind to each other. Do not address any aggression or any hostility to any family members on either side of this lawsuit, because, again, there are no winners, there are no losers. Shelby County has lost one of the, as the lawyer said, a favorite son of Memphis, Shelby County, Tennessee. And Ms. Turner's family has also lost their son. So there are no winners, no losers. Thank you all for your patience.
And there you saw Judge Coffey kind of offering some words of advice and comfort to Lorenzen Wright's mother, who'd been there throughout this whole thing. So now that was the sentencing that had already taken place on the murder charge. Now Judge Coffey today sentenced Billy Ray Turner on the remaining charges. So let's look at what Judge Coffey had to say today.
And having said all of that, the court finds that he is, in fact, a standard range 1 offender. The court was sentenced Mr. Billy Ray Turner to the maximum sentence of 25 years in prison as a standard range 1 offender for the offense of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. Was sentenced Mr. Turner to the sentence of 25 years confinement in the Tennessee Department of Correction for the offense of criminal attempt first-degree murder. The state is asking the court to consider running some of these offenses consecutively. Ms. Perry says, Judge, Mr. Turner is 51. A life sentence, which he's already been sentenced to, if you run all these other sentences concurrently, life under current Tennessee law is construed to be 60 calendar years. Cannot be paroled, cannot be placed on probation. You'd have to serve a minimum of 51 years in prison based on sentence reduction credits or behavior credits that he may earn while in custody. A life sentence under current Tennessee law is construed to be 51 calendar years. He's been in custody about 5 years. An argument is, Judge, if you make him serve this life and run everything else concurrently, Mr. Turner will be about 97 years of age by the time he gets released from custody, and 97 years is more than enough punishment if you do anything other than that. Very few people would live to the age of 97 locked up in prison in a small 6x6 or whatever that cell is, probably with a maximum security center at prison, rather Riverdale in Nashville, outside of Nashville, because of the nature of these offenses. The argument is that, Judge, these sentences should be run concurrently.
Josh Ritter, there was a lot going on there, talking about consecutive versus concurrent sentences, 51 years. So explain to us basically what's going on. I mean, the judge is basically saying, look, he's this old, sentencing him to anything else. He's basically already gotten a life sentence. So tell us about what we just heard.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. What he's talking about is what is the point here? If I do it concurrently, he's going to get out at the age of 97 if he even lives to be that long. And if I do it consecutively, we're essentially talking about a life sentence that he'll never get out of prison. It's a funny way of looking at it by the judge, because usually judges just go, listen, according to the sentencing guidelines, is it appropriate for this sentence to be consecutive or concurrent, and not really considering what that means on the back end, meaning what that means as far as the age of the release of the defendant. But the judge is making that calculation here. And he's saying, what is the point, really? If I do this consecutively or concurrently, we're essentially talking about a life sentence anyways, or the release of a man who's very, very old and at the end of his life. I appreciate what the judge is doing, but I wonder if it's legally right. And I wonder if it creates some kind of appellate issue. Probably not if he goes for it concurrently, because the only people who would really take this up on appeal would be the defendant. But it was interesting to hear the judge kind of think that through as far as what it meant for the future of the defendant.
Well, Jimmy Martin, Sharina, was somebody who testified in this trial. He was granted immunity in this case, and he's already serving a second-degree murder. He's serving a sentence, a 22-year sentence, on second-degree murder for killing his girlfriend, and now he's hoping to get a new trial in that case. Already granted immunity in the case to testify against Billy Ray Turner. So what do you make of that? I mean, he's already convicted of murdering his girlfriend, and now he wants a new trial. I mean, do you see any hope in that?
I mean, hey, it's his right to give it a shot. That's all he's got, right? He has to give it a shot in order for him to live with himself, I guess. But whether or not he's going to be successful, well, I have no idea. We're seeing all sorts of things happening with judges coming up with verdicts and decisions that they feel is just and proper. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens. There's really no way for us to know exactly how it's going to go. So I guess let's see what happens. But yeah, it's a shot for him, and I don't know that it'll go anywhere. But stranger things have happened.
That's true. Stranger things have happened. And we see people get new trials all the time. I mean, it doesn't happen a lot, but I feel like recently we have seen some people get some new trials on cases we've covered here on Law and Crime, two just recently out of Georgia. So, Josh, I want to touch again on the sentencing part of this. And we were kind of talking about this. Christina, the producer, and I were talking about this. It's like, well, you're already getting sentenced to life on the murder, so why even bother with the sentencing on the remaining charges? Is that just all because, you can't just leave that hanging out there? If you don't sentence him on that other stuff, it's possible error or whatever. Explain that to the viewers, because I think a lot of times people have questions about that. It's like, well, you're already doing life. You just gave the guy a life sentence. What do we care about these other charges that obviously, conspiracy to commit murder is very serious, along with the intent charge. So tell us why it's even necessary.
Well, for a couple of reasons. One, you're absolutely right. It's crossing T's and dotting I's, right? You can't have somebody who's convicted of a crime and then just simply not sentence them on that. It would have to be up to the prosecution to say, you know what, we withdraw that or we dismiss that. We're not going to pursue any kind of sentencing on that conviction. But the other thing it's doing is it's acting as kind of a protection, safety net to the murder conviction, because, he does have a right to appeal. And let's say he does appeal this and that for whatever reason they find that his appeal will not stick. Well, they know that they've got these other charges that basically add up to essentially a life sentence anyways, that are kind of acting as a backstop, so that in case something happens with that murder charge, which is, obviously we're talking about tail wagging the dog with these other charges, but if something happens with that murder charge, they know that they have these other ones acting as a kind of protecting the conviction, so that they realize that this won't lead to a disaster of a person who committed murder getting out.
Makes sense. Makes perfect sense. Okay, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to get back into the Eastman trial in Colorado. You don't want to miss that. I'm Anjanette Levy, and you are watching For the Record on Law and Crime.